So I'm Matt Paulson and we're going to look at a video today. It says, Mom reacts to 9 shocking facts about the Quran. Let's not do any hubbubaloo, but let's look into those 9 shocking facts and see if they hold water.
The following are some facts found in the Quran. Number 1. Origin of life. Water is essential for all living things. We all know that water is vital to life. But the Quran makes a very unusual claim. We made every living thing from water.
So scientists aren't so excited about water being the origin of life. Many scientists today say there's a fundamental problem with the idea life's cornerstone molecules break down in water, and that it attacks the links and eventually breaks them. In carbon chemistry, the water is an enemy to be excluded as rigorously as possible. A quote by Robert Seperal in his book Origins.
Will they not believe? In this verse, as the origin of all life.
Again, scientists aren't saying that the water is the origin of life. Scientists point out the problem that molecules break down in water. So to say that life comes from water is not a very scientific statement.
All living things are made of cells. We now know that cells are mostly made up of water. For example, 80% of the cytoplasm, basic cell material, of a standard animal cell is described as water.
Well, that's true, but the Quran says we have made every living thing from water. Will they not believe? It does not say that every living thing is made of water. So point number 1 is refuted.
Number 2, iron. Iron is not natural to the earth.
That's not 100% true. The earth is made up of 80% iron, and it comes from exploded stars, not asteroids.
It did not form on the earth, but came down to earth from outer space.
That's partially true. Iron is made inside of stars, specifically red supergiant stars, and then they come into an end of their star life, and they explode, and it's from that planets are formed. So it's not asteroids hitting the Earth. It's about the iron of a supernova forming a planet.
Scientists have found that billions of years ago, the Earth was struck by meteorites. These meteorites were carrying iron from distant stars, which had exploded.
Now he said something a little bit differently. The heaviest element, like iron, however, is formed only in massive stars, which end their lives in supernova explosions. Those explosions is what makes up the 80% of iron that exists in our Earth today. It's not asteroids hitting our Earth. That's a lie.
The Quran says the following on the origin of iron. We sent down iron with its great inherent strength and its many benefits for humankind.
That's not entirely true. Most of the iron in the earth is developed from an exploded star billions of years ago. Most of the iron that we see today is branded iron formation from geochemical leaching of basalt. And it comes from the deposits of iron oxides in the ocean beds. So we have number 2 debunked.
That's fucking mental.
Number 3, sky's protection. The sky plays a crucial role in protecting the earth. The sky protects the earth from the lethal rays of the sun. If the sky did not exist, the sun's radiation would have killed off all life on earth. It also acts like a blanket wrapped around earth to protect it from the freezing cold of space. If this temperature was to reach earth, then the planet would freeze over instantly. The sky also protects life on earth by warming the surface through heat retention, greenhouse effect, and reducing temperature extremes between day and night. These are some of the many protective functions of the sky. The Quran asks us to consider the sky in the following verse. We made the sky a protective ceiling, and yet they are turning away from our signs. The Quran points to the sky's protection as a sign of God.
The Bible said it about 1,000 years earlier. It says that God enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. Stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. And of course, a canopy would be protection, just like the canopy in the Quran. So, number 3, the canopy is protection over the earth, is debunked. the Bible also uses the term canopy over the earth. So it must be where Muhammad got it. Muhammad copied the Bible, which is apparently obvious.
Number 4. Mountains. The Quran draws our attention to a very important characteristic of mountains. Did we not make the earth as a resting place and the mountains as stakes? The Quran indicates that mountains have deep roots by using the word stakes to describe them. In fact, mountains do have deep roots, and the word stakes is an accurate description for them. A book titled Earth by geophysicist Frank Press explains that mountains are like stakes and are buried deep under the surface of the earth. Mount Everest, the height of which is approximately 9 kilometers above ground, has a root deeper than 125 kilometers. The fact that mountains have a deep stake, like roots, was not known until after the development of the theory of plate tectonics in the beginning of the 20th century.
So there are no stakes under any mountains. What they have is plate tectonics, and those plates are what gives the roots, and the plates are down deep. So there's the idea that there's roots or stakes is a misnomer. Video quoted Frank Press in his book. So here is a picture from Frank Press's book, Understanding the Earth. And that's Mount Everest there on the picture. Look for any pegs. There are no pegs. Number 4, mountains have pegs, is refuted.
Number 5. Expansion of the universe. At the time when the science of astronomy was still primitive, the expansion of the universe was described in the Quran, and it is we who have built the universe with our creative power and keep expanding it.
Science has a bunch of opinions about whether the universe will expand forever or whether it contracts. Right now we see it as expanding, but it's not static. So we believe that it's going to speed up and then slow down, and eventually there'll be heat death and it will stop. So that is the majority opinion, and right now it looks like the keep on expanding idea is fading away. In fact, Albert Einstein said his greatest mistake was adding a fudge factor to his cosmological equation that would keep the beginning of the universe from happening and ending. He did that fudge factor in order to keep God out of the equation. If there is no beginning, then of course there's no beginner. But there is a beginning, that means we have a beginner, and that's God. And if there's an ending, that means the Quran is not scientific, it's poetic, and it doesn't have any kind of miracle.
The fact that the universe is expanding was discovered in the last century. The physicist Stephen Hawking, in his book A Brief History of Time, writes, "The discovery that the universe is expanding was one of the great intellectual revolutions of the 20th century. The Quran mentioned the expansion of the universe even before the invention of the telescope."
That's right.
Crazy if the Bible said it first and Muhammad's listening to people recite the Bible at where he goes and sells his goods. The characteristic of the universe stated more frequently than any other in the Bible is being stretched out. 5 different Bible authors penned such a statement, 11 different verses. So it's not so much a miracle if the Quran is only just plagiarizing the Bible. The Bible said it first. Out of the 11 verses, Job 9:8, Isaiah 44:24, and Isaiah 45:12 make the point that God alone was responsible for the cosmic stretching. And what really makes the Bible amazing is that the Bible claims that God predated the time and that God exists outside of time. The Bible is the only holy book that says God exists outside of time. And when things are poetic, you can look for anything. Maybe the sun sets in muddy waters. Maybe that's true too. So where do you get literal? Where do you get poetic? How do you decide which one is which? Muslims only pick out what's literal when they find something that's similar to modern science, which is not a way that you don't look for factual evidence of logic and reason by going through the poetic words of the Quran and then looking for something that might reflect scientific processes. That's a bunch of hocus pocus. Expanding universe refuted.
Sun's orbit. In 1512, the astronomer Nicholas Copernicus put forward his theory that the sun is motionless at the center of the solar system and that the planets revolve around it. The belief that the sun is stationary was widespread amongst astronomers until the 20th century. It is now a well-established scientific fact that the sun is not stationary, but is moving in an orbit around the center of our Milky Way galaxy. The Quran mentions the orbit of the sun. It is He who created night and day, the sun and the moon, each floating in its orbit. The Quran would have been wrong according to astronomers just a couple of decades ago. But we now know that the Quranic account of the sun's motion is consistent with modern astronomy.
That's a bunch of crap. The orbit is the sun going from the east to the west, and it sets in muddy waters. Mind-boggling to think that somebody would look at an orbit that goes as the sun sets and the sun rises, and then sets in muddy waters, and then you come up with orbit, and then you think it's the orbit of the sun in the Milky Way. That's really tough. In Quran 1886, it says the sun sets in muddy waters. So we see that you got to explain it. Is it poetic? Is it real? I think number 6, the orbit of the sun is refuted.
Number 7, the ocean. The Quran uses imagery to convey its deep meanings. Here it describes the state of the unbelievers as darkness out in a deep ocean, which is covered by waves, above which are waves, above which are clouds, layers of darkness, one upon the other. When one puts out his hand therein, he can hardly see it. So this is quite poetic. It says the unbelievers are like darkness within the unfathomable sea, which is covered by waves, which is covered by other waves. Otherwise, there's clouds and darkness upon others. When one puts up his hand, he can hardly see it. The narrator does not explain what does it mean when an unbeliever puts out his hand, he can hardly see it. What can he not see? Oh, his hand is not visible within him. So you can see this is poetic of the unbelievers, and he's throwing out things that are poetic that have no substance and scientific fact. So Muhammad is making a theological observation that somebody is not observing the signs of Allah. It has nothing to do with scientific fact. Since an unbeliever can see his hand and that waves upon waves and darkness are all theological terms of spirituality, that means it's refuted. Those God gives no light to, they have no light. Number 7, I'm going to say that the ocean is not really explained in a poetry about unbelievers. I'm going to say it's refuted.
And it was wrote so long ago, and so many of the core foundations of the planet and, the way things work, that only someone would know through scientific discovery to an accurate T. Like we said in the last video about the embryo.
Gosh, a leech is not an embryo, and an embryo is not a leech.
To know
Two
exactly
different things.
what...
This cartoon is baloney. That is not what an embryo looks like at 24 days. There's what an embryo looks like at 24 days. Muslims are really grasping at straws that they try to make a leech look like a 24-day-old fetus. There's not anything like a 24-day fetus. Look at what the fetus looks like at 24 days.
There was a cruel, oppressive tribal leader named Abu Jahl, who lived during the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. God revealed a verse of the Quran to warn him. No, indeed, if he does not stop, we will seize him by the forehead, his lying, sinful forehead.
So this is a lie by the narrator. The verse never says forehead. The verse says forelock. It only makes sense. You can't drag a person by the forehead, but you can drag them by the forelock, which is the hair on the front of your head.
God does not call this person a liar, but calls his forehead, the front part of the brain, lying and sinful, and warns him to stop. This verse is
So the narrator keeps repeating his lie throughout this thing because he doesn't want the forelock to be lying. He doesn't want the hair to lie. He wants the head to lie. No Muslim translation ever translated forehead.
The motivation and the foresight to plan and initiate movements occur in the anterior portion of the frontal lobes, the prefrontal area. The part of the brain that is responsible for movement is said to be seized if the man does not stop.
What is to be seized? The brain? The thought? No, the hair on the front of the head.
Secondly, numerous studies have shown that this same region, frontal lobe, is responsible for the lying function of the brain.
So the narrator is quoting an old research study, but the new study showed that the amygdala is the place in the cortex where we do our beginning of our lies. So the lies start in the center of the brain and not in the frontal cortex. So whether this is the forehead or the forelock, still it's not a miracle. This is debunked.
Number 9. Pain receptors. For a long time, it was thought that the sense of feeling and pain was dependent on the brain. However, it has been discovered that there are pain receptors present in the skin. Without these pain receptors, a person would not be able to feel pain. Consider the following verse on pain. We shall send those who reject our revelations to the hellfire. When their skins have been burned away, we shall replace them with new ones so that they may continue to feel the pain. God is almighty, all-wise. God tells the people who reject his message.
That is absolutely whacked out baloney, because if the skin burns off and the skin comes back, then if the pain receptors were in the skin or in the brain, wherever, you're still going to feel the pain. It's crazy to think that somehow there's something special about the skin that brings the pain. We all know that if you burn your finger and then it heals and your skin comes back and you burn it again, the pain will repeat itself. This is totally stupid.
These are just some of the many facts found in the Quran.
That is a bit of a shame. If you get sent to hell and your skin burns off, you go, thank fuck, just go, here's some more skin.